reasonable people are fleeing the Democrat Party. After having dinner with Trump, his own panel staged what looked like an intervention. The message is clear. No dialogue allowed with the political opposition. I'm breaking down why this mentality is destroying the fabric of our democracy. And why Maher's stand, whether he realizes it or not, is a stand for America. A liberal comedian being essentially cancelled by his own side simply for engaging in conversation with the President of the United States. And the way Maher handled himself when confronted by his panel, absolutely priceless. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming. We're covering the stories the mainstream media won't touch with the perspective you won't get anywhere else. So for those who haven't been following, Bill Maher recently accepted an invitation to have dinner at the White House with President Trump. The dinner was arranged by Kid Rock, who shares Maher's belief that there might be a better way to handle political disagreements than hurling insults from across the country. Now, Maher has been a vocal critic of Trump for years. He's not suddenly become a Republican or abandoned his principles. But what he did do was something that has become almost taboo in our hyper-partisan environment. He sat down with someone he disagrees with, and a reaction from the left. Complete and utter meltdown. You'd think Maher had committed some kind of cardinal
tariffs well before that.
The backlash was so intense that when he returned to his show, his own panel members staged what essentially looked like an intervention. What does it say about our political climate when simply having a conversation with someone from the other side makes you a traitor to your cause? When did dialogue become forbidden? When Maher returned to his show, you could tell this wasn't going to be a typical episode. His panel, including some woke commentator who immediately invoked what the internet thinks, essentially tried to shame him for meeting with Trump, but Maher wasn't having any of it. What stood out to me was his authenticity in that moment. This wasn't the usual sarcastic quipping Bill Maher. This was a man genuinely frustrated with the state of discourse in our country. When that panelist tried to lecture him about Trump's motivations, suggesting that Maher was being used as a PR prop, you could see Maher's patience evaporating in real time. His response, "I don't know you, I've never met you," wasn't just a dismissal. It was a rejection of the entire premise that he needed to justify having a civil conversation with the president. The most telling moment was when Maher called out the panelists for taking cues from the internet, saying, "That tells me everything." And he's absolutely right. We've reached a point where many on the left don't form their own opinions. They simply absorb whatever the Twitter mob or TikTok influencers tell them to think. What Maher did, whether he realizes it or not, is expose the cultish nature of modern leftist politics. Dissent is not permitted. Dialogue with the enemy is forbidden. And those who step out of line must be publicly shamed and brought back into compliance. What we're witnessing goes far beyond Bill Maher or Donald Trump. It speaks to a fundamental shift in how the left approaches politics. It's no longer about ideas or solutions. It's about ideological purity and tribal loyalty. Think about this. Bill Maher has been a liberal voice in media for decades. He's criticized Republicans relentlessly. He's championed progressive causes, but none of that matters now. One dinner with Trump and suddenly he's suspect. This is precisely why we're seeing an exodus from the left. Reasonable liberals are finding themselves increasingly uncomfortable with the purity tests and thought policing that have become hallmarks of progressive politics. They're being pushed away by the very movement they once called home. Piers Morgan made an excellent point during the panel when he talked about the tribal fury raging on social media. Most Americans aren't like that. Most people don't exist in a state of perpetual outrage. They're capable of disagreeing without demonizing, but the vocal minority, the ones driving the conversation online and in newsrooms across the country, they've abandoned any pretense of reasonable discourse. And when someone like Maher steps out of line, they pounce. Really interesting about this whole situation is the evolution we've seen in Bill Maher over the past few years. While he still identifies as a liberal, he's been increasingly critical of the woke excesses of the left. He's called out cancel culture. He's highlighted the absurdities of gender ideology being pushed on children. He's criticized the identity politics that have consumed progressive discourse. In many ways, he's standing athwart the tide of modern leftism, yelling, "Stop! And for that, he's being treated as a heretic, not because his core values have changed, but because the movement has shifted so dramatically beneath his feet that his once mainstream liberal positions now appear almost conservative by comparison. Maher has mentioned multiple times that he enjoys performing in conservative areas more than liberal ones these days. Why? Because conservatives still understand the concept of jokes. They can laugh at themselves. The woke left, on the other hand, treats humor as a form of violence. This dinner with Trump might just be the final straw for many of Maher's progressive fans. But it might also be the moment that many centrists and classical liberals realize they have more in common with today's right than with the modern left. The media reaction to Maher's dinner with Trump has been predictably hysterical. Headlines suggesting he's betrayed his audience or legitimized Trump abound. Opinion pieces questioning his judgment and integrity fill the pages of formerly respected publications. But what exactly is the betrayal here? Having a conversation, treating the President of the United States with a basic level of respect, trying to find common ground rather than deepening divides. When did these things become sins in our political culture? The truth is the media ecosystem profits from division. CNN, MSNBC, and their ilk need you to believe that Trump is not just wrong, but evil. They need you to believe that anyone who engages with him is complicit in that evil. Because without that narrative, what do they have? Their entire business model is predicated on maintaining a level of hysteria and outrage that keeps viewers tuned in. And someone like Maher, who dares to suggest that maybe we should at least talk to each other, threatens that model. That's why the backlash has been so severe. Not because what Maher did was so terrible, but because it threatens the carefully constructed narrative that has been built around Trump and his supporters. What Bill Maher did, sitting down with someone he disagrees with, used to be considered not just normal but virtuous. It was how politics worked. It was how progress was made. The founding fathers disagreed vehemently on fundamental issues, yet they managed to create a system of government that has endured for nearly 250 years. They did this not by refusing to speak to each other, but by engaging, debating, and compromising. Today, the very idea of compromise has become anathema to the far left. It's seen as moral failure, as capitulation to evil. This absolutist thinking isn't just counterproductive, it's dangerous. A democracy cannot function when half the country refuses to speak to the other half. Progress cannot be made when dialogue itself is considered a betrayal. We cannot move forward as a nation if we cannot even sit at the same table. This is why what Maher did matters, not because one dinner will change the world, but because it represents a willingness to engage that has become increasingly rare in our political landscape. And the fact that this simple act of civility generated such outrage tells you everything you need to know about where we are as a country. Here's my take on all of this. Bill Maher isn't becoming a conservative. He's not suddenly a Trump supporter. What he is a man who recognizes that our current path of mutual hatred and demonization leads nowhere good. I don't agree with Maher on most policy issues. I think his takes on religion are off base. His stance on abortion doesn't align with mine. But I respect his willingness to listen, to engage, and to challenge his own side when they veer into absurdity. That's something we need more of, not less. We need liberals who are willing to call out the excesses of the left, just as we need conservatives who are willing to call out the excesses of the right. What we're seeing with Maher is a man who refuses to be confined by tribal politics, who refuses to let others dictate who he can talk to or associate with. And for that, he deserves credit. The woke panelist who tried to shame him on his own show represents everything that's wrong with modern political discourse. The smugness, the moral certainty, the unwillingness to consider alternative perspectives. Maher's frustrated response wasn't just justified, it was necessary. So where does this leave us? With a choice, I think. We can continue down the path of division, where political disagreements become moral crusades and dialogue with the enemy is forbidden. Or we can follow Maher's example, imperfect though it may be, and try to find a better way, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans. We all want what's best for our country, even if we disagree on what that looks like or how to get there. And finding common ground starts with being willing to have the conversation. Bill Maher took that step, And for that, despite our many disagreements, he has my respect. That's my take on the situation. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like, subscribe, and share with someone who might appreciate a different perspective. Until next time, this is the Black Coffee Podcast. Thanks for listening.